bit.ly/2LSNVTA or by calling 203-946-7934 before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Public can view the meeting at https://bit.ly/2LSNVTA or listen by phone at 646-558-8656. Webinar ID 844-01420985. For the required password, contact public testimony at newhavenct.gov. And now, after all of that, I will ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with my vice chair.
Alder Sal DeCola, Ward 18.
Alder Antunes.
Alder Antunes, Ward 12.
Alder Roth.
Abby Roth, Ward 7.
Alder Winter.
Stephen Winter, Ward 21.
Alder Singh. Your mic needs to be turned on.
Kempton Singh, Ward 5.
Thank you. And Alder Smith.
Alder Smith, Ward 30.
Thank you. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome, public. We will hear the first item, which is in regard to the Lions Club generous donation. Do we have the person on the line?
I'm not sure whether or not you can hear me, but this is Catherine.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you kindly state your name and address for the record, please?
Oh, I am not here on behalf of the Lions Club. I'm the city's chief landscape architect.
Oh, is someone here from the Lions Club? I know they were going to possibly call in.
She's the only call we have. If there's I don't see the name. Misty, who was the Catherine? Oh, there's Catherine, the landscape. She came in the other day. Misty, where'd Misty go? And Gio is here. Okay, cool. All right,
Okay.
well,
You know what? Before we actually continue, I just want to recognize Alder Daryl Brackeen, who is here, and Majority Leader Richard Furlow. Okay. So would you like to comment on these, the offer?
So the Parks Department welcomes the offer of donated benches. We have not yet discussed the locations, but we have tons of need and are welcome the opportunity to partner with the Lions Club.
Okay, I know that there was the president that was going to join us this evening. I do think she was having some technical difficulties earlier or challenges. So if she comes on later, I would respect her testimony. But for now, we can open it up to questions from the board. If anyone has any questions.
I just wanted to put my name for the record, Giovanni Zinn, City Engineer, 95 Soundview Terrace. I'm also here on this item in case you have any sort of larger questions on it.
Great.
One thing I would note just for the record on this is that the Parks Department does have a set protocol for accepting benches, donations of benches. So it is atypical for it to come to you. It probably does not have to, but it's here and you might as well accept it.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Zinn. If any of my colleagues have questions, please raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. Okay, I do not see any hands. All right, let's move on then to item number 2, which is a resolution from the board. And I will ask my colleague Alder Roth to present her statement.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank everyone who's here overall from the public for coming, and from the Secretary of State's office and the Registrar and City Clerk's office for this important conversation. And I want to sincerely thank Secretary of State Merrill for her advocacy around the expansion of the definition of who can file an absentee ballot in Connecticut. I introduced this resolution along with Alders Brackeen and Winter because it's critical that the state legislature passes legislation when they're in special session on the budget that expands the definition of who can file an absentee ballot in November. Like the executive order governing the August 11th primary, we need to ensure people can file an absentee ballot because of concerns about COVID-19, even if they do not knowingly have COVID-19. I view November's election as the most important one in my lifetime. To be blunt, we have a president who is tearing apart our nation and destroying democracy. While we can't control how voting works nationwide, we can, and I think we must, control how voting works in our own state. We can't be complacent because the rates of COVID-19 are slowing and assume it'll be safe for everyone to vote in person on November 3rd, or that everyone will feel comfortable going to vote in person on November 3rd. There's so much unknown about this deadly and highly contagious disease, and we could easily have a second wave in the fall. And circumstances can change extremely quickly, as we now know from experience. Given the incredibly high stakes in our election, both from a health perspective and the leadership of our country, we must prepare now for a situation where it will be risky, especially for vulnerable individuals, to go to the polls and vote in November. Legislative action to change the definition of who can use an absentee ballot will enable us to be prepared. If the state legislature does not act, we'll suffer the consequences. We'll be forcing people to decide between voting and risking their health, particularly those voters at higher risk from COVID. That's unacceptable in my view. We'll be risking people not voting because they're scared to go to the polls because of COVID. Also unacceptable given the high stakes. And frankly, we risk lawsuits claiming people illegitimately filed absentee ballots because they weren't sick. They were just anxious they would get sick by going to the polls. Given the stakes in this election, we should not be taking those risks. Again, there's an easy solution to avoid these problems. That's for our state legislature to pass legislation when they next meet, expanding the definition of who can file an absentee ballot, making it clear it covers people who do not feel comfortable voting in person because of COVID. This change will protect the health of our residents and protect our democracy and the critical right to vote. Finally, I think it's really important today to learn the specific details of our city's plan for August 11th and for the November general election. The questions we've submitted today to the city clerk and registrar's office are also critical to the issue of a change in the state law on absentee ballots, because some of the questions raised demonstrate the extreme challenges of safely and efficiently managing the voting process with a large turnout in the age of COVID. The complexity and risks are another reason why it's critical that our legislature quickly acts to amend the definition of who can use an absentee ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Roth. I know we were supposed to be joined by Secretary of State Denise Merrill, but I don't see that she is on. I do want to recognize that Michael Smart, our city clerk, is on. Thank you for joining us this evening. I will entertain questions from our colleagues at this point, unless Michael Smart would like to add anything.
Give me a second. I have to bring him in.
I'm just so.
I have to bring him in. So give me a second, please. He's in.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Smart.
Mike
Welcome.
Smart, 1 Lion Street.
Mamie Gardner, 13 Main Street.
Hi, May. Welcome.
It's just saying luncheon.
Okay, good.
Okay. Do either of you have anything to add in regard to this resolution that we would like to propose?
Mamie Gardner speaking, from City Clerk's office. I don't have anything to add, but I really don't like the way the state is handling the issuing of the ballots. It's not local handled. It's going to be state handled by the state with mass mailings. And it's going to be a little confusing with them giving us mail drop boxes for the town. I'm still not clear on everything that Secretary of the State wants to do, issuing the ballots, the applications first, and the ballots from their end, and then the clerk's office handling the ballots when they're coming back. It's a little confusing, but I think it's not a good system.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Reed. That's very helpful information that we will make sure gets to our Secretary of State to recognize that there are many questions. I do know that colleagues submitted some questions to the state as well as to the registrar's office and I believe to your office as well. So I appreciate you being here. With that in mind, I'm going to open it up to my colleagues. If anyone has anything to add. Alder Roth, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I guess I have, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the city clerk's office. I appreciate that they're confused. I guess I'm trying to find out if they reached out to the Secretary of State's office and what those conversations have been to try to get an understanding of the process. It was announced several weeks ago, so I guess it's concerning to me that there's not more of an understanding yet. So just to get more information about what conversations have taken place would be very helpful.
You know what, can I intercede one moment? I believe Secretary of State Denise Merrill is logging on. So if you all don't mind just holding a couple of minutes while we get her on board. Good evening, Secretary of State Denise Merrill. I see that you have joined us. Welcome.
So she gave me the new login, so I apologize for being late. And I'm trying to tell my staff right now how to do this.
No worries. I know it's challenging to be on Zoom versus in person. So
There
thank
we
you. Thank you for being with us tonight. There have been a couple of questions that have come up. You didn't miss that much, but we do have our city clerk on, Michael Smart, as well as May Reed from our city clerk's office. And we are asking questions regarding the state and not clear on issuing ballots. So I'm going to welcome Miss May to come forward again with her question for you. And Alder Roth, I will recognize you right after that, if that's okay. Thank you. May?
Yes.
Do you mind repeating what you just told us? That way Secretary of State can recognize your question.
Yes, Madam Secretary, I'm just not, or the office is not really clear as to the mass mailing that will be happening from the state's end. Mass mailing of applications to everybody in the town, and then the issuance of the ballots from the state. Is that a clear understanding from the conference call that we were on this morning?
Okay, I can go through it with you line by line. It is posted on our website. There is something called the Connecticut Election Plan, and it is detailed in exactly how this will all work. But I have to say right off the bat, basically, nothing changes that much. All the processes you usually do for absentee ballots are still in place. But we, just from the outset, we are very concerned that no one would ever have to make a choice between their health and their vote. And that's our bottom line. We have to try to figure out in your community and every one of the other 168 towns, exactly how many people are going to choose to vote absentee versus come in person. And it's a very tricky business because we don't really know. 4 primaries were just held in other states, and a lot of people chose to come to the polls. So we have to be ready for either. So first of all, let me just say that. We have decided in order to save cities and towns money and also to facilitate voters making sure they get an application in a timely way when city halls and town halls are closed, we decided to do a mailing. We decided this with the Town Clerks Association and the ROVAC. They were all saying, we can't possibly do all this ourselves. So we have arranged for a mail house, which is a state contractor, to mail applications, not ballots, applications to every primary voter. So that is just registered Democrats and Republicans, right? And they will use the CVR list that is all maintained at your local city hall by the clerks and registrars, mostly by the registrars. Those applications will go out next week because I'm very concerned that people don't get them in time. And this is to make it easier on everyone, on the voters and on the clerks, who normally would have to do all this mailing themselves. Now, I don't know, is New Haven City Hall closed at this point?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so. Okay, so that's why we're doing that, and that's how we're doing it. Now, at that point, the applications will go back to the city clerk as usual. Everything else kind of stays the same, frankly. And then they will note, as they always do, who's getting the absentee ballot. They will be able to use the mail house to actually mail the absentee ballots as well, again, to save money, to be more efficient, and to make sure people get their ballots in time. And so they will say there's a code, the barcode can be read electronically. So that will be read in, the mail house will get the information and mail out the ballots in the duplicate envelopes, all that the same as always. Then the only other thing we're doing, because city halls are closed, we're buying for each town a box that's used in all 50 states as a drop box. So because people won't be able to go into City Hall potentially to drop off their ballots. I mean, if City Hall's open by August 11th, great, they can just go in and drop them off, right? But if they can't, you can use this very secure locked box. And think of it as a mailbox. It's really the same process as if you were the voter dropping your absentee ballot in the mail. Only maybe you don't want to go find a stamp and all that, so you can drop it at City Hall instead, just as always, except the problem is City Hall might still be closed. So that's the basic outline of how this will work. I know there's a lot of kind of more in the weeds questions, and that's why we had a very long discussion with all the clerks today. There were 52 questions that were answered on the call. We're trying to make people understand that basically it's pretty similar to what we always do. It's just we're afraid there's going to be a lot more of them. And that is a very legitimate concern. And if that is the case, the other thing we're doing is we're asking towns to come up with a safe polling plan. Because the other thing we have to do is make sure the polling places are safe. Because like I say, there's still a lot of people that are going to come to the polls, as always. We are allowing towns to make certain changes if needed, but we have to approve it. We are really, really concerned about any collapsing of polling places. I frankly think we might think about having additional polling places, because our polling places will have to be following all CDC guidelines, 6-foot distancing, masks, security. We will provide for every town the PPE, additional money to hire people in the clerk's and the registrar's office if needed, equipment, all kinds of safety equipment, and anything else that a city can document that they need to manage the greater number of people who might, we don't know, might want an absentee ballot. So that's the broad outlines of the plan. We're trying to answer every question from everyone, but as usual, the problem with our election system in Connecticut is we don't have counties. And so every tiny little town has to be, their voters have to have the same opportunity to vote as every other town. And that's what we're working for. We need everyone to have the same opportunity to vote. And I'm terribly concerned about these elections. Now, I have to tell you, this is only for the primary. None of the changes we've made are valid for the general election, because the only way we're able to do this is the governor's executive order that allows everyone to get an absentee ballot in this very, very narrow circumstance of the emergency order, the COVID virus, and the fear that people have of having excessive contact. So just be aware that none of this is going to be happening for the general election, just for the primary. Should I stop there? It's a lot, I know. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I gave you like the broad outlines of the steps of the plan.
No, that was very helpful. And if you don't mind, I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee members, because I know that, if I'm not mistaken, some questions were submitted to your office, but we can get that clarification from the office as well. So I will revert to Alder Roth, who had started earlier, and then move from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I might actually switch my question a little bit. I thank you, Secretary of State Merrill. That was very helpful to hear. The resolution actually that we're introducing tonight would be to try to have legislation passed to enable the same absentee, that anyone with a fear of COVID could also have an absentee ballot in the general election. But to just I had two follow-up questions to what you explained in terms of the money available from the state. What is the timing for when the city of New Haven would have to submit any application for that money, for how many people it needs to help in the city clerk's office or for the PP and things like that?
Right now, they should have it in by now, honestly. I think we'll go through the end of next week, but we've been hounding people to get these plans in, because we can't tell what you need until you tell us. So about 65 towns have already applied for these funds. It is 100% funding for anything that you can show us is over and above what you would normally spend on an election. And that includes personnel, that includes equipment, and includes almost anything that you can relate to the additional expense that you're going to bear because of this situation.
Thank you. That's helpful to know that deadline. Actually, one follow-up to that question, then one additional question. When you talk about the PPE, I have a fear of people showing up. I'm not sure if it applies just to the poll workers, or also if someone showed up to vote without a mask. Could there be a supply of masks so that if people came to vote without one, they could be given a mask so that they're able to vote?
Absolutely. Again, that's an expense of elections that you wouldn't have normally. Yes, that would absolutely be eligible.
Great, thank you. And then my final question for now is, you mentioned having to approve the plan for the setup for the in-place voting locations. What is the deadline for when those plans have to be approved? Is it also basically now?
Yes, that's been, you submit one plan we're calling the Safe Polling Plan. And that should include any adjustments that you might want to make. As you probably know, normally we do not allow changes in polling places for different elections. You should keep the same polling places to avert voter confusion. But in this case, we're thinking that some towns or cities might want to change a polling place to a larger location so they could achieve the social distancing, for example. But that plan, we announced this several weeks ago, that you should get that plan into us because we have to have time to make these adjustments. Yes.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Maybe tonight we'll be able, since I see the registrars are on, to hear some details of those plans. I think that seems really important to be finding out now. Thank you.
I will now call on Alder Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks so much for joining us, Secretary Merrill, Madam Secretary Merrill.
Nice to see you.
You'd mentioned that no one should have to make a choice between risking their life and exercising their right to vote. Given that there's a real chance of a second wave in the fall, do you believe that the legislature should act to correct this if they come back for a special session to handle things like the budget?
Absolutely. And I thank you for considering your resolution because I think it's terribly important. I see the primary as almost like a test case of what's going to happen in the fall. And it's a much bigger challenge, as you can imagine, because our primary at this point is so late. I really don't know what kind of turnout we're going to have. The general election is going to be the big one. We all know that. And so preparing now is critical.
And would you agree that there's, a larger level of democratic legitimacy to having the legislature act and make this change through statute as opposed to, some sort of follow-on executive order, having one person make this decision about how we cast our ballots?
Absolutely. Executive order is not an ideal way to run a government. And with all due respect to the governor, I think he's handled it very well. He's walked that line very carefully. I think it would be really difficult unless there is another wave. He could certainly extend the executive order, which right now I think runs out September 9th. But it would have to be a legitimate extension. And you're taking liberties with the Constitution, the state Constitution, as we all know. For a decade, I have been telling people we're going to end up in a situation where we cannot adjust to whatever happens with our absentee ballots. And here we are in a situation where we can't really respond the way we'd like to by allowing people to vote without feeling fear of getting sick. So we're doing the best we can with the executive order. I fully support the governor's executive order, but the legislature could act to change the statute enough that we could allow lots more people to vote by absentee if they so chose.
And a change could include additional criteria, like for someone to say, I'm worried about contracting the virus, fear for my health.
Well, that's sort of a trick question because I'll just tell you what the Constitution actually says. What the Constitution says is you are able to get an absentee ballot if you have illness, sickness, I think they use in the Constitution. All right, so that has never been tested as to what that actually means. The statute is more rigid because the statute says you are able to get an absentee ballot due to his or her sickness. So you can see that kind of straps us in a little more. You have to actually be sick yourself. Whereas I think if we looked at the state constitution, we could say, well, maybe illness means a general illness in the land or underlying illnesses, which my opinion, I did an opinion on the statute that says that if you have one of those underlying conditions that lead to the COVID, whether it's heart conditions, diabetes, there's a number of them, then that for me would constitute your illness that would cause you to be able to get an absentee ballot. There are other provisions they could put in the statute that would help go down that path. And the lawyers are busy trying to figure all that out. But I think there is a way they could expand the statute enough to allow most people to get an absentee ballot. Ultimately, what we have to do is get that language out of the state constitution, which we have tried several times. In fact, there was a bill last year and the Republicans blocked it. I'm sorry to say, I'm not trying to be partisan here. It's just a reality. For whatever reason, they have decided this is a partisan issue, which it is not. Most absentee ballots are filed by Republicans. The biggest town for absentee ballots, the number of absentee ballots, greatest number in one town is Greenwich. Second, West Hartford. Third, Fairfield. Because these are people who commute and they wanted to get absentee ballots. So I think it's a myth that this is partisan. It is not partisan. It's about voters needing that opportunity to vote, however they choose.
And in terms of how the program will work, you said that there's return postage. So if you have an application, the postage is included for someone to return their application?
That's correct. Yes.
So I mean, we could see, I think right now, roughly 1 in 10 voters votes absentee. Is that right?
Oh, not even that. I think
Not
it's
even that?
between 5 and 8% usually. We're one of the lowest in the country that have absentee ballots. You can see why. We are the most restrictive state in the country for absentee ballots.
But I think you could easily see that double or even, half of voters say that they don't want to take a risk.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
And so in these plans, local governments develop, they would say, here's what we normally spend on processing, whatever the percentage is, and here's our forecast, and here's how we'll need to adjust the
right.
processing of absentee ballots.
That's right.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, it's a tricky business. I mean, as we're discussing, you can tell. I mean, I can't predict it myself. I was surprised by the number of people who came out to the polls in these other states. 4 states had primaries Tuesday, and it was not what they predicted. They predicted a lot of people would not want to go to the polls, and they showed up. So we have to be ready for whatever comes.
And in Wisconsin, is it correct? I read, it's correct that they were able to trace illnesses to polling locations. Is that your understanding?
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
I think there were 52 people, something like that, who contracted COVID. But bear in mind, what they did in Milwaukee was exactly the wake-up call we all had, because they thought everybody was going to get an absentee ballot because of COVID. Well, for a whole bunch of reasons, those absentee ballots either didn't arrive, didn't get sent, and there's tales of bags of them sitting still in the post office, et cetera. So everyone showed up at the polls, but they went from 80 polling places to 4.
Mhm.
That's how they got chaos. And that's why we are so suspicious of collapsing polling places. Honestly, I would argue you probably need to expand them a little bit.
Thank you so much, Secretary Merrill. Thanks
You're
again,
welcome.
Madam President.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Alder. The committee does not have the possibility to raise their hand through Zoom. So if any colleagues have questions, I'm just going to call out your name and you could just say yes or no. So Alder DeCola, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Alder Antunes,
No questions.
Alder Singh,
No question, Madam Chair.
Alder Smith.
I do have one question. Being that, thank you also, Secretary Merrill. Being that we're going to open up polling places, not knowing who is contacted with COVID, how will they be tested?
We are not doing testing. We have no capacity to do that. We haven't gotten that good at this, but I'm hoping there will be testing more available by then, but we have no way of knowing. All we can do is protect the poll workers as best we can and enforce the social distancing. And it will
Okay.
be enforced.
All right, so we wouldn't know if any poll workers came in there with COVID by not, admitting that they were sick or anything. They'll just start working.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Wow, thank you.
Are you all set, Alder Smith?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions by colleagues? Alder Roth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess this is a process question. Are we going to hear a presentation from the registrar's office, and then have another round of questions?
It would actually be good now that we have some kind of process from our Secretary of State to hear from our registrar's office, and I know that they are here. Just one quick clarification for you, Secretary of State, and that is really the only thing that changes is that the applications are going to be mailed out to the residents. Everything else is the same process as it's always been for absentee ballots.
From the voter's standpoint, yes. It means less of the process will be done at the town clerk's office. And then you do have the drop boxes. So that's different because we haven't had those before.
Right. And I think it's important to stress too that it's applications that are being mailed out, not
Correct.
the actual ballot, because a lot of folks are under the impression that they're going to get a ballot in the mail, but it's
Correct.
actually an application in which they will need to fill out, send it back to the city clerk's office, and the city clerk's office will mail them the ballot, correct?
Well, hopefully the city clerk's office will use our mail house to mail the ballots. They'll record it, although at the city level, they are able to use the mail house to actually also mail the ballots, which again takes the burden off the city clerk's office.
Right. Great. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. If you don't mind staying on, we will just wait to hear from the registrar's office. And in case any additional questions come up, it would be great for you to stay on the call.
Okay.
Thank you. At this point, can we have the registrar's office introduce themselves, state your name and address for the record, please?
Marlene Napolitano, 25 Russell Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
Chanel Evans, Democrat Registrar, 1460 LEC Grasso Boulevard, New Haven, Connecticut.
Welcome. I'm happy to have you here. Can you maybe expound a little bit on what the registrar's office plans are for delivering this new system?
Yes, so again, like Secretary Merrill was saying, things change frequently. Can you guys hear me okay? Because I'm on two different phones in the same room. Can you guys hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're one of the towns that can consolidate our polling places, so we'll have all 40 polling locations up. Another thing that Secretary of State wanted us to do is, if it was possible, to have 50% less of what we usually have, but we can't do that as well. We know that a lot of our poll workers will sign up, but won't show, so we did give our first portion out to the state on the positions and how many people we have hired. We're hiring the moderator, the assistant registrar, 2 official checkers, 1 ballot clerk, 1 machine tender. The Republicans will also have their own table for 1 or 2 official checkers, depending on the amount of electors in that area. And then possibly we'll also share the ballot clerk with the official checker. And we'll try to have an additional person for a machine tender just in case someone needs to take a break. We will also have greeters in certain locations that are still somewhat new to people in the area. We'll also have additional people there to wipe down the stations and for guidance for the lines, meaning 6 feet apart, and also trying to conduct within polling locations. There are a lot of polling locations that are not super big. Some are fair sizes, and we're trying to make the best layout possible with what we have. Our plan. So it was sent up in the morning for our final report. Once it's approved by SOC, then we will send over to the alders and the co-chairs, and I can send it over to CSEP as well. So everyone can kind of know what's going on, and we'll also post it on our webpage. I believe that's kind of everything. Is there any questions you guys may have?
If any
Sorry, no more. Sorry. So again, while Secretary of State is also providing the masks, the gloves, the sanitizer, we also have the mayor's office as well, pitching in with that, and as well as our office to make sure that our poll workers have the right amount of gloves for the day. Of course, we don't expect them using the same gloves for 16 hours, but so they can exchange out, excuse me, shields, face shields, masks. We're still also looking to the plexiglass because it's so popular right now. It's super, super expensive. And again, you're thinking about 40 polling places. You're thinking about 3 shields per polling location. The separation within poll workers has always been kind of 6 feet or more apart from each other anyways, but for our official checkers, they will still remain close because they share the cross-up sheet. So between sanitation stations or squirt bottles, electors come in with squirt, leave out with the squirt. We have to come in and clean up. And then I know 2 things from our meeting this morning. Ops is also trying to find a vendor to help supply pins for each individual, each elector. So everyone has their own pen. No one has to share your word about wiping down pens. So that was one good thing. Another thing, which is not set in stone, but I want to continue to look on our own as well as trying to find which Marlene said. Now I'm done.
I think it's also important to note that we're also going to provide a trash container. So when the electors are leaving the polling location, the gloves and mask, if they choose to, can go into the receptacle and we won't find them out
In the parking lot.
in the streets and all over.
For people to litter.
Yeah, it would be too much litter. So the containers should be as they exit the polling location. Takes them 2 seconds to take the gloves off, deposit what they want into the container and go up to business.
And I think someone else asked, if, I'm not sure if it was on the call morning or up here, about people, electors can bring their own pins, but not saying we don't encourage it, just we want to make sure they're using the right proper pin for the ballot.
It needs to either be blue or black.
So pen is most likely.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you explaining it. I'm going to open up to the committee for any questions or concerns, suggestions. So again, I'm just going to go down the list since we don't have the capability of raising our hands for some reason on this Zoom call. I'll start with Alder DeCola. Do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Alder Antunes.
I have one for Secretary Merrill. Is there anything that would prevent us from requiring all our poll workers to be tested before we accept them?
You
You're
need to,
muted.
there you go.
Yeah, oh, am I muted? No.
You're okay now.
Oh, I'm okay now. Yeah, no, there's nothing that prevents you from doing that. We would probably not pay for that out of the federal funds, but I'm not even sure of that, honestly. As I understand it now, there's a lot of testing locations available at this point. So there's certainly nothing preventing the city from requiring that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Roth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Registrar's Office for presenting that. I have a few questions. I'm thinking of, I appreciate your mentioning social distancing of the workers. I'm thinking of the people going to vote, and I'm thinking of, for example, at 200 Orange Street where my ward votes, and there are very long lines, and it's always very crowded, and often people doubled up in the hallway. What is people I think are used to now, standing 6 feet apart from other people, but just space-wise, kind of how logistically are you thinking that's going to work, winding down sidewalks? And also it will be a slower process if things are getting wiped down in between votes. And so that's just going to lead to an even longer line. So I'm just curious your thoughts about managing that.
We still on? Is our mic still on? Yes, okay, I hear from you on my cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, again, in certain locations, there'll be more helpers, greeters in a sense, versus other wards or districts, I shall say, for this one, to kind of keep the line against just like how Walmart do 6 feet apart. When we get outside, we'll still try to get signs to kind of say, show your distancing, but we're not gonna go all the way around the corner, but I'm pretty sure everyone still knows the whole 6 feet rule, but we'll go as far as possible as that we can, where you have enough ground to post stuff inside the ground, or even something to hang on, like a post pole or something like that.
I guess something, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Something I'm thinking a lot about is getting messaging out to people about voting. I think you said something about putting information on your website. I think information on your website, getting information out through the alders, using through the mayor's office, whatever. I think both about the absentee ballot process and this option, because I think we want to be encouraging people to take advantage of that, and also assurances of how you are making it safe to vote at polling locations. I think it's basically 2 months away till the primary and not that far till the general election. And so I'm curious if you sort of have thought through a strategy for your messaging about the election.
So another thing that I brought up with Marlene was on our postcards that we usually send out to electors to have a little bit more information, which we know will cost more, but SOC said that they help because this is out the norm to kind of have more safety caution instructions and anything. So we're going from like a small, for an example, 5x8 to maybe like 5x11 to kind of give you a little bit of rules on that. It has not been finalized just yet. It's something that we're still working on to kind of send out to the electors. One thing I did bring up a little while back, I want to say a couple of weeks ago on one of our SOC calls, conference calls, was they said they were going to mail out the applications for the ballots. So my suggestion was to give the town clerk a heads up, and for our office heads up, if it was possible to send out smaller cards to say, hey, you should be receiving something from SOC about application. This is not verbatim, just to kind of get you to understand a little bit where I'm coming from. But will you be going to the polls, or will you be coming to, or will you be completing the absentee ballot? And at the time, it was not encouraged because they're trying to say that it may seem like we're giving people the option to choose what, to me, it still seems like you're still choosing. But I'm not sure how else we can go about trying to get numbers for that. But as of right now, just the postcards that we use to reach out to people is what we were going to just give more information. Please bring the mask if you have it. If you don't, we'll do our best to supply. What we're creating this emergency plan with, supply masks for electors as well, not just for the poll workers, and that they'll be provided their own pen, etc.
Thank you.
Denise?
Yeah, let me just
Hi.
jump in here and say we are working on a big public information campaign. We will have a texting platform where people can text questions or text to us their intentions or whatever however we design it. Probably not in time for the primary, but definitely for the general. And we are also working on a volunteer and / paid we call it the new generation of poll workers, because we've known for a long time that we need to recruit some younger people to work at the polls as a civic contribution to their communities. So there's a lot of people out of work right now. They wouldn't mind earning a little extra money working at the polls. The poll worker training is all just a little online thing that you do. So we are trying to help, because that, frankly, I think is the biggest issue, is recruiting enough poll workers to work at all these polls and have them appropriately trained and protected and all that. It is a big job. So we're doing that. We're also actually talking to some companies such as Big Pen to see if they would be able to provide pens for every polling place. We think that has a pretty good chance of happening. Walmart's is another one we're approaching. So we're trying to help in any way we can, but the public information piece of what we do will help, I think. You know, both texting, and we will have a website. We already have one. It's called myvote.ct.gov, where you can see all of this. But we will be using various media to do outreach to people as well.
That's really helpful to hear, and maybe on the city, both the city clerk and registrar's office, they could have a link to that state site. Then everyone would have uniform information. I'll defer to my colleagues in a second. Just one more small question. Will you be keeping the doors open on polling places so not everyone has to touch the handle as they enter and just can walk into the door?
Yes, so the only issue was that certain polling locations cannot have the door open depending on the weather. We definitely not mind that, but again, we are also hiring more people, so crowd control can also open the door. And then in some areas, I'm working with schools to see if we can still have the automated push button for some of the schools that qualify.
I missed the last thing you said about the schools, sorry.
Good question, I forgot.
Okay,
thank you.
Abby, some of the schools have that blue push button that you just touch to open the door. So what we also intend to do is have people available that if someone has to do that, that button can be wiped. We'll have white available, so everything's got to be wiped down. So that's what we're going to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And a doorknob too.
And we, again, we'll have the sanitizing wipes to wipe down frequently. Oh, you just said that.
Just said that.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to get water. I'm very parched.
Are you all set, Alder Roth? Okay, thank you. Alder Winter, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I found Alder Antoon's idea of requiring testing of poll workers really interesting. Is that something that's included in your plan, or would you be open to doing that, partnering with the health department in order to get that testing done? Maybe I guess you'd need about a week to wait to get the results back, or maybe longer in case you have to come up with. Yeah, what do you think of that idea, and is that feasible for you?
Yeah, so it's, wait, you said, Ms. Evans? Make sure I'm not speaking out of turn.
I don't think so.
Because I'm on mute. Oh no, I'm under your account. Yeah. Sorry. So that's one thing I did want to talk about today, or actually email Ted about, because usually give our questions to him. And if it was possible, I know they're expensive, and Secretary Merrill kind of already touched on it, that it may not be refunded through the federal grant or anything like that, but if we can do like at least start off with a temperature check. Notice the hospital, how they have the ones where you don't touch you, so that would be cool. Or even if we have like the little temperature sticks, not sticks, but the plastic ones, I'm not sure the correct medical term for it, but for them to stick up before the beginning of the shift, that would be great as well, just to start off. We have put extra money in our budget, so again, in case of an emergency, didn't anticipate COVID emergency, but just emergency, and I feel like this suits that. So that's something I would like to try for our co-workers.
Well, currently testing is free, and the administration's expressed some openness to setting up pop-up sites, and so perhaps we could coordinate to have a pop-up site ahead of the election with the poll workers you're planning to use.
Yes, so the only issue I have with that, I wouldn't say that I have issues, just I feel some way about it, my personal opinion. Some people may not take that test because of the way it's done. So,
right.
Like for me, the way my sinuses are set up, you would think I have COVID after they test me because we set my allergies off. So a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. So that's the only, if they force them to do that. But we will say, hey, temperature, that's one thing, not sticking something through your nose, back in your throat. But I can definitely give that as an offer for people, but I can't force it. If it was something enforced, I definitely would throw that out there.
Is that something that can be mandated, and can you force or highly suggest that to somebody that's going to work for you in the polls? It kind of, I don't know, I could see some issues with that.
Through the chair, maybe that's something we could get an answer on from Corp Counsel.
Yes, noted. Thank you.
It sounded like there's going to be markings you mentioned on the ground for social distancing, and then you mentioned the idea of doing maybe doing plexiglass. If plexiglass is like expensive, would you have some other barrier like plastic sheeting or something between checkers and voters as they come in?
So we don't actually have to, it was one of the things that, Secretary Merrill, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong. In our guidelines, it was like a either or. They can have the face shield, which we are getting, versus the actual plexi. But we were just trying to be super, super cautious where they can put their ID to the window and we could check it that way. But again, we'll have the gloves, we'll have the sanitizers on the table, and they'll have a regular mask and a face shield. So it's kind of like a either or situation, but we were trying to do both.
And you mentioned the great idea of modifying the postcard that folks get. Is that part of the plan that was submitted to the Secretary of State's office?
I'm not hearing the motorcycle going by.
Stephen asked if the elongated,
I'm sorry, because
the elongated card was part of plans that we would send up to Secretary Merrill.
It was not a part of that, but it after, and like I said, me and Marlene just started talking about it briefly. I will add that in there, yes.
And one final thought on that, maybe if it, I don't know how the timing would work, but it could be another opportunity to let folks know about the expanded absentee eligibility.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much. And thanks for all the work you've put into the plan so far. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Secretary, I'm sorry, that's not my thing.
Just to add to that, that information will be on the applications for absentee ballots, just so you know. So
good.
Great, thank you. Alder Singh, do you have any questions for the registrar?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. This is for either Secretary of State or the Register. I would recommend, since we're speaking about the door, we should hire someone to, open and close the door that for voters to go in and out so it won't spread contamination. That's the recommendation. That should be an added cost and added to the budget. Secondly, what is the turnaround time? I know the state is going to mail an application out then it has to go to the vote or local registrar, and then that has to send back to the state. Then the absentee would come back. Then that has to prepare and go to a drop box. I'm looking, what's the turnaround time for these so people can have that turnaround time information? Thank you, Madam Chair.
So,
thank you, Alder.
I guess we'll take the first part, and I think Secretary Merrill can finish the rest because that's part of absentees. Absentees come from the town clerk's office. But for the first portion, yes, again, we'll have greeters who will multitask with making sure 6 feet is people are 6 feet apart, and also make sure that windows are wiped down frequently, or to open or to open doors as well.
Okay. Are you all set, Alder Singh?
Well, you want me to talk about the turnaround time?
Sure.
Yeah, turnaround time. That's precisely why we are mailing the applications out from a mail house. They will arrive hopefully by, let's say, if not the end of next week, the week after that. As far as mailing out the absentee ballots themselves, yes, you're right. The people have to mail that application back, but there's a stamp, self-return envelope in with the application. So they don't have to go find an envelope and a stamp. You just mail it back. And then the time-consuming part is then getting it from the city clerk, who will record that, but then they can instantly give it to the mail house, and the mail house can also mail out absentee ballots. And the mail house can actually track where the ballot is because it's all electronic, so it'll be much more efficient actually. And that's why we're doing it that way. The city clerks won't have to handle all those ballots. The mail house can do all that mailing. So it'll be more efficient than usual, frankly.
Thank you for that. Alder Smith, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open it up for public testimony. So if anyone from the public would like to speak, I believe I saw some hands up. Do we have an order for that? Al? I see it. I saw.
We'll
Let's
bring them in
see.
as they raise their hands.
So I see two hands that are up, Elizabeth Saylor and John Martin. So maybe we could start with Elizabeth Saylor because I believe hers was the first hand that I saw go up, followed by John Martin, Aaron Good, and Lydia Bornick. So if we could have them speak in that order, that would be great.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Saylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and address for the record, please.
It's Elizabeth Saylor, Saylor, 100 York Street, Unit 50, New Haven.
You may proceed.
So I am a member of a group called the Persisters. We function out of University Towers on the corner of York and Crown. I know a lot of you know who we are.
Yes, we love you.
Well, we try. And the reason I wanted to do a couple things, I really appreciate the information that you've made available through this meeting. I appreciate a lot of people's comments, and I particularly appreciate Abby Roth proposing this. I would like to say that I am interested in the issue of the poll workers because, as we know through our own personal experience, the majority of poll workers tend to be 60 and over, and they have legitimate concerns about volunteering. So I would like to know from Chanel, and I'm very impressed with all of the things they've put in place, by the way, if there is a particular link that folks could follow in order to volunteer as a poll worker, because I know I'm personally interested in that. I would also like to say as a poll worker, I would be more than happy to have a COVID test if that's something that needs to happen. And I would also like to say that with the absentee balloting, we have been trying to disseminate to our organization that the difference between absentee balloting and vote by mail is absentee balloting is a two-step process. You receive the ballot in the mail, you receive the application in the mail, and you are applying for a ballot, where vote by mail is a one-step process. And I'm wondering if Abby's proposal is something that could help us, for want of a better term, put pressure on the legislature or the governor to make vote by mail the absolute way that we can vote in November. I would also like to say that we have discussed within our group that we would like to continue to encourage people to actually show up and vote if they feel comfortable doing so in order to get people in the habit of voting. So I would wonder if anybody on the Board of Alders or if Secretary Merrill would like to comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments from the registrar or from the Secretary of State?
Thank you very much for the question. As far as going vote by mail, I think you're right to encourage people to continue to come to the polls if possible. It's still a wonderful community event on Election Day. I am not someone that thinks we're going to get to vote by mail anytime soon. It would require a massive change in the way we do business. I think we ought to move in that direction, but all our statutes would have to be overhauled. And there's a great deal of resistance to that. As you know, there's a lot of discussion about fraud. Are there people that could vote by absentee who aren't real, or dead people and so forth? And as specious as I believe those claims to be, I still think we have to address the very real issue of processing a much larger number of absentee ballots or voting by mail. So, we've been talking about it. We certainly have been looking at ways we can do it. But for one thing, it would probably have to be a much more regional system. Every other state in the country has counties that do most of the work, because you have 50% of our towns have only one polling place. They're very small. We could never have the kind of equipment we would need to process ballots in every town. So it's a big change for us. I think we ought to move in that direction, but I think it would be very hard to do overnight.
And I guess we will answer the first question, Ms. Saylor. If you go on to New Haven City website and go to our department, if you just fill out our application online, I'll have my clerk Maritza, or we'll have Marlene, the Republican registrar, reach out to you and give you further information that you may need to know or want to know. And if you have any questions, you can give our office a call at 203-946-8035. And I still encourage all the alders and co-chairs, if you still have people who are willing to be a part of this process, young folks as well, like Secretary Merrill was saying, which I am always for. We are told to go to the schools once a year. We go twice, just to make sure we're not missing anyone. And we're still encouraging, maybe we change their mind on their thoughts of, oh, I'm not registered, so I want to register now. So we're definitely in tune with the young generation as well.
Thank you so much for your time and attention, Chanel and Secretary Merrill. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. Okay, can we have the next participant, the next?
Can you all hear me?
Yes, John, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is John Martin, 93 Pearl Street, New Haven, Connecticut. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Merrill, and our registrars for all the explanations. I'm a ward chair for Ward 7, Abby's ward, and Alder Ross ward, and so a person who's going to be part of this process, and there are 60 ward chairs across the city, as you all know. Yeah, I just want to restate, of course, that August is our practice run before November 3rd, and that cannot be overstated. November is going to be really intense and very crazy and very, very important for everyone, and this is our chance. And so both, I really appreciate the kind of dedication and care being put into planning out August, and then just encourage everyone to not lose sight of November, because that is going to be the kind of, all the numbers are going to be much bigger, and the whole process is going to be much bigger. So on that note, Secretary of State, I of course encourage push and for everyone on this call, push for the governor and for the legislature to make the change and the changes that we are doing now in effect for then. And yeah, and generally encourage the board and the state to be very progressive with decisions around voting. I mean, the most important thing from my point of view for this entire process is clarity and communication, clarity and language. Voting is a cornerstone of our democracy, but it's still kind of confusing to people, and absentee ballots and mail-in voting can get very confusing for people who've never done it before. And so just being as clear as possible and communicative, multiple touches on people, different mediums, phone calls, mail-in things from the registrar's office, from the state, anything that we can get, signage, stuff on websites. And one comment specifically maybe to the registrar's office and to the others, which is to lean on the institutions that exist, informal, lean on us, the ward chairs, the 60 of us who do a lot of get out the vote stuff, lean on the ward committees to spread the word, to communicate, give us the tools we need to be communicative and to be clear to all the people that are neighbors and the people that we are in touch with. Work through the management teams. You still have a few months of management team meetings to either present or talk to or announce and talk through community email lists, everything. I think this is unprecedented times, and we need to be unprecedented in the way we handle this. And so it's a lot of pressure on our registrar's office, and I think we all believe in you guys, and a lot of pressure on the state. And I'm really proud to have a lot of clarity and a lot of work put on by everyone on this call. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I just want to interrupt 1 second. Secretary of State Denise Merrill, if I know your time is valuable and I know it's getting late and you probably had a long day. If you, we can submit any further questions for you. We do have a couple of more folks that would like to testify. If you would like to stick around, or I want to respect your time and I truly appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. People are clamoring for dinner around here. So I want to thank everyone who's spoken, and thank Chanel and the registrars for their work, and the city clerks as well. It is going to be difficult. They have done a lot of planning. Obviously, we have done a lot of planning. We're going to do everything we can. We're working very well together. Chanel's on the phone with us multiple times every week, and that's a good thing. So we will do our level best to give every voter the best experience we can. And you're right, the primary is the test run. And we will be doing more. And I am putting as much pressure as I can on the legislature, mostly the legislature. They are the ones that really should act here. So anything you can all do to help, I would very much appreciate. And thank you very much for taking this on. It's terribly important, especially now.
Yes, it is, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure Chanel has every number and email address of folks from your office in case she has any questions, concerns. And if the public wishes to call your office, is there a number that you have just in case?
Well, I'll be honest, we're not really in the office right now, like many people, and we're not really doing phones, but you can certainly do emails. And there's a website that has all the information and the emails you need for people in what we call our elections division. It's called LEAD, L-E-A-D. And I think Chanel, isn't it true? Isn't it lead@ct.gov? I think that is actually the email address. We have teams now working in different parts of the state. So New Haven region has its own team now in my office, and we're trying to make sure everybody's working together as best we can under very difficult circumstances. And all I can say is thank goodness for the federal money, because we would not be able to do any of this without that $5 million that was allocated through the CARES Act. Can't thank your congressional delegation enough. They really went to bat for that. And so it's terribly important. We wouldn't be able to do all this mailing and the PPEs and the poll workers and all the things that we're going to be able to do to make sure everyone gets a chance to vote. So thank you very much. I think I will call it a night. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again for joining us. It's really greatly appreciated, and buon appetito.
Oh, thank you. Very, very nice to be here anytime. Okay, bye-bye.
Sorry, folks, for that interruption. I just will go now to the next person, which I believe is it Aaron? Aaron Good?
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm here.
Thank you. Hi, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Aaron Good, 45 Williams Street, New Haven. I'm on the executive committee of the League of Women Voters and co-founder of the New Haven Votes Coalition, which is a nonpartisan effort to increase voter participation and civic engagement here in New Haven. We've seen tremendous injustices in our country recently. Voting alone will not solve those injustices, but the solution to those injustices must include broad and equitable access to the ballot. This November will be the most critical election of many of our lifetimes, and we have to make sure with absolute certainty and resolve that everyone who wants to cast a ballot can do so safely and conveniently without having to choose between protecting their health and exercising their basic constitutional rights. So there are just a few points I want to bring to your attention. Number one, we do have, as you've heard, a gubernatorial executive order for the August primary. We have a commitment from the Secretary of the State to send absentee ballot applications to all active eligible voters. But our residents need to understand an application is not the same as a ballot, and the very restrictive provisions around absentee voting are still in effect for the general election unless and until the General Assembly modifies Chapter 145 of the general statutes. Several municipalities in Connecticut have passed resolutions calling on the state legislature to loosen those restrictions on vote by mail, including West Hartford just a couple nights ago, their city council. And I would strongly urge this board, the Board of Alders, to do the same. And I've submitted in writing a statement from the League of Women Voters National Office calling on Connecticut to expand no excuse absentee voting, enable vote by mail for the duration of the 2020 election cycle because of COVID-19. And I think that statement would be a great template for an aldermanic resolution. Point two, you heard about this in March. Congress passed and the president signed the CARES Act for COVID-19 relief, as part of which $400 million was authorized for election assistance to local governments. Those funds are distributed by the Federal Election Assistance Commission to the states, and from there down to local jurisdictions. We all know the budget picture in New Haven. We don't want to miss out on that funding opportunity. And to that end, we need clarity on how much will be available to New Haven, what are the exact eligibility requirements, and we need to have, as you heard, a shovel-ready plan for how that funding can best be used. Point three, this may be the most important thing, voter education. We need an extensive education campaign for our voters to make sure that going from our current level of 5 to 10% vote by mail to 100% vote by mail for the primary is a smooth transition and not a fiasco. Currently, there is no information on the city website about the governor's executive order 7QQ pertaining to the primary. That needs to change. There is enormous confusion for many people, including the President of the United States, about the difference between an absentee ballot application and an actual absentee ballot. Many people have never voted absentee before. They may not know that you have to retain the security envelope and sign it. Some young people may not be familiar with how to obtain stamps, and some post offices like Yale Station are actually operating right now on very restricted hours, which could also present problems. And, we may also need to educate the public about the prospect of substantially delayed election reporting and election results. I'm not sure that's been mentioned tonight, but that's a big thing. And I want to let the board know, and the registrars of the League of Women Voters and New Haven Votes Coalition stand at the ready to participate in all aspects of a citywide voter education campaign. Fourth, preparation for the August primary. In Section 4 of the governor's executive order, the clerk is supposed to designate a secure drop box or drop boxes, presumably somewhere with 24/7 access for completed ballots. We really do need clarity about that location as soon as possible. 5, preparation for the general election will almost certainly have both expanded absentee voting and also in-person voting, including same-day registration. Now, as you've heard, many, if not most, poll workers in New Haven are retired senior citizens. These are individuals in at-risk categories for COVID-19. How will we make sure we have sufficient personnel for conducting in-person activities on election day without putting our residents at risk? And if we don't have sufficient personnel, is there a contingency plan that would potentially involve closing or consolidating polling places? Also, assuming City Hall is open again by November, in order to handle expected demand for absentee voting, we need to significantly extend hours for in-person absentee voting at 200 Orange Street. Normally we do that like for the weekend before the election, but we may need to do that for 2 or even 3 weeks before the election. Just the final point is about voter registration. We need new protocols for safely conducting voter registration. For the foreseeable future, it's not going to be possible to go into high schools to register seniors. It's not going to be possible to register newly naturalized citizens at the federal courthouse, which our organization is actively involved in. Many of the voter registration activities that the registrars and community organizations normally conduct have been complicated or made impossible by COVID. And we need an investment of resources into expanding online voter registration, which includes strengthening and extending our very limited system of automatic voter registration, which currently only applies to the DMV. And I'm hoping, I think something to explore as well is having voter registration possibly available at COVID testing locations, and to do that obviously in a safe and socially distanced fashion. So thank you very much for your time and attention to this critical issue affecting all our residents. And I believe you have my written testimony as well, which expands on some of these points. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time. And next is Lydia, followed by Rob Palmer. And Lydia, if you can state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
Lydia Bornick, 100 York Street, Ward 7, and I am one of the persisters also. I have several questions about voter registration. I think Aaron touched upon them. We, as a group, do voter registration. We have done it here at 100 York and at 90, Crawford Manor, 90 Park. And it's a concern for us how we're going to accommodate that and get voter registration. One question I have, are the forms going to remain the same for voter registration? That was a question. The second, I have a concern about getting the absentee application in time. We have a problem as a high-rise building. Our mail sometimes does not come, doesn't arrive in time. If we are told or someone says they haven't gotten an application, do we call Secretary of State? Who do we, inform that our residents aren't getting the absentee ballots? We have a lot of new people moving in and out. There are new people downtown, and we have to make sure that we are very, very aware of getting people to register and finally to vote. And I wanted personally, because I'm a volunteer driver, I've always driven people to the polls. And that's a concern for all of us. We pick up people. I don't know what accommodations that is, but I would hate to be, deprive people of actually, if they want to vote, how are we going to get them there? So that's just something I would like to share with the registrars and the committee. It's really important that as we said, that this is an important election. Not only do we want them to train in the primary, but we have to get people out to vote. So thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. And I think some of the areas to address the drivers is to really push for they to fill out an absentee ballot. I saw Alder Roth's hand up. Alder Roth, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Lydia. I think the point about if someone doesn't get an absentee ballot, if it doesn't arrive somehow, what they do is a really important one. I didn't know if our city clerk knows, even though the application, even though the applications are getting mailed from the state, can people, if they don't receive it, still reach out to the city clerk's office to get one?
So I would assume, the answer to that, I would say yes. If that's different, we would work in collaboration with the state to make sure that we would address it. Because, I think, she brought up a point. They're doing the mailing, but we're processing all of that information. So we would certainly have a hand in it. And, we take good pride in making sure that, folks that they're missing their ballot or haven't received it, that, we would address that. That's
great. Thank you so much. So I guess we can, if we hear from someone that they didn't receive it, in a few weeks, we'll have them reach out to the city clerk's office to get the application.
Absolutely.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. We have the next speaker, which is Rob Palmer. Mr. Palmer, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
All right, my name is Rob Palmer and my address is 111 Park Street, apartment 3T in New Haven. I'm a third-year medical student and speaking on behalf of a group of medical students working with a national movement among healthcare workers and organizations to promote absentee voting and vote by mail in an evidence-based, nonpartisan manner to ensure that citizens vote safely in upcoming elections. Our analysis of the research from Wisconsin's April election is that vote by mail may reduce the risk of infection during elections and that in-person voting is a public health risk. Moreover, given how little confidence we have about how the virus will manifest itself in the coming months, we strongly recommend that we take preventative action to reduce the risk of needless death and suffering associated with in-person voting. It seemed to us that it would be a travesty and frankly an embarrassment to find ourselves in a reactionary position this fall. We consider this issue to be a public health crisis in which healthcare professionals and public health experts have a unique and important role. To this end, we're pursuing numerous projects, including partnering with national organizations, publishing op-eds, and piloting a vote-by-mail initiative in local healthcare systems that we can subsequently try to implement at healthcare systems nationwide to effectively promote vote-by-mail and absentee voting. We're in the early stages of developing this movement, and we'd welcome any feedback and help that you would like to offer us, because frankly, some of us are not experts on all the bureaucratic steps that go into this. We're better at the medicine than we are at the government federal functions. So the best way to reach us is via email, and the email that is best for that is rob.palmer@yale.edu. That's rob.palmer@yale.edu. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. I see Alder Winter's hand up. You are on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for Mr. Good, if he's still on. He mentioned having like a resolution he wanted submitted, but we do have a resolution before us, and I was wondering if he had any feedback on the language of the resolution we have to expand absentee voting criteria.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the language is good. I'd have to review it again. I haven't looked at it in a few days, but I think addition would be some of the information that Mr. Palmer just provided about avoiding the risk of infection and having a potential second wave reignited, which, as you mentioned before, Alder Winter, was something that occurred in Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I do not see any other hands up from the public. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Alder Winter? You're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just, I know we heard from the registrar that they had sent in their plan, and was just would like to ask this city town clerk if our plan has been submitted or when it might be submitted.
We're working on our plan, and everything should be finally next week. So we're in the process. So
thank you, Mr. City Town Clerk. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that, Alder Winter. I know there is submitted testimony from Alder Burkeen. I don't know if Alder Burkeen would like to present it or just submit his testimony, or if you want me to read it. But it's in, I just want, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no,
There
I
you-
was just gonna say if it can be read and filed for the record, that's okay.
Sure, thank you. And before I do that, I will just ask for the second time, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. And for the third time, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Okay, I do not see any hands up. Is there a motion to close the public sorry, we're gonna listen to a couple more items before we close the public portion. Any questions or concerns from the board, from the committee? Okay, we will now move on to item number 3. And item number 3 is just a formality from All Points Technology Corporation. They've come before us in the past very randomly. It's mainly to hear from the public but I will open it up to the committee if you have any questions regarding this item. I will start with my vice chair, Alder DeCola. Any questions?
No questions at this time.
Alder Antunes,
No questions at this time.
Alder Roth,
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder Winter, Alder Singh,
No question, Madam Chair. Thank
and
you.
Alder Smith.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. And as I mentioned, it's a formality for the public to be able to speak. So I will open it up to the floor. If there is anyone from the public that would like to speak on item 3 from All Points Technology Corporation, please raise your hand. For the second time, if there's anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And for the third time, anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands, we will move on to our last item, which is for community action only. And it's just a formality, again, to just read and file. I will open it up to just the committee. There will be no public portion of this, of speaking on this item. So if the committee has any questions, concerns,
Madam Chair,
yes.
if there is no more public testimony, then I would move to
We could
close the
close.
public portion.
You know what, before we do so, I did see that the first item, I think she left. Misty, did she get off the call? Ms. Farrell from the Lions Club? Let me look.
She
Yes.
did. She
Yes,
did.
okay.
She had to go to her monthly meeting.
Okay, so Ms. Farrell is the president of the Lions Club. I was going to give her the opportunity if she was still on, but seeing that she isn't, do I hear a motion to close the public portion?
Second.
Okay, the public portion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion, any abstentions? Everyone in favor? Say
Aye.
Okay. Sounds like the majority. So the public portion is closed for the evening. Does anyone want to start moving the items?
I move item 1.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on item 1?
I think it's a great deal. They're offering to put 2 more benches. Once they go through the formality of working with the Veterans Association and the Parks Commission, it should be a good deal for the city of New Haven.
So the only thing I will ask is we do need to amend this order, and I call on Alder Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd move that we substitute the amended language that Misty Mazza sent us at 7:29 p.m., which removes the City Plan Commission in case the City Plan Commission report is not required, and also points to pending parks approval.
Second.
Okay, the amended item has been moved and seconded. We will be voting on the amended item of number 1. It's just changing the wording so that the order of the New Haven Board of Alders granting the request of the New Haven Lions Club to accept the donation of 2 new park benches for the city of New Haven and the relocation of the existing granite bench to a better suited location. This item didn't necessarily have to come before us, but it did for various bureaucratic reasons. And in the language, it does indicate that the Parks Commission and any other interested parties, if applicable, will need to be reached out to. And I know that Misty is guiding Ms. Farrell with the process. So again, I'm going to take a vote from each one. We are voting on the amended language of this first item. So I'll call on Vice Chair DeCola.
Yes.
Jerry Antunes, Alder Antunes.
We're voting on the amendment, not the item, right?
Correct. The amended, yes.
Yes.
Alder Roth,
Yes.
Alder Winter,
Yes.
Alder Singh,
Yes, on the amendment.
and Alder Smith.
Yes.
Okay, so the majority has it. It is now voted favorably to amend this item. Now we will vote on the actual item of accepting the 2 park benches, which is very generous of them. So we will vote on the item again. Vice Chair DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Antunes,
Yes.
Alder Roth,
Yes.
Alder Winter,
Yes.
Alder Singh,
Yes.
Alder Smith,
Yes.
and I'm forgetting myself. I'm a yes as well for both. Okay, so the yeas have it. Any discussion?
Um,
Yes, Alder Singh.
on the benches, location will be determined later with Parks and Rec Department where the bench will be located.
That is correct, yes. So Parks Department will now be involved with the placement and any further information. We as a board are just accepting this generous gift from the Lions Club in accepting the park benches.
Do we have any input on where the bench would go around that memorial?
You always have input, Alder Singh. You'll need to get in touch with our Alder representative in the Parks Commission, which is Alder Santiago. Does that answer your question?
Be froze out because I know the location very well. I pass there daily, and I would prefer that bench to set back, more like the memorial going, look, parallel with the memorial, because not on the front of the sidewalk. Then it would be overused and misuse.
So you can get in touch. Did I freeze before? Is that what you?
Yes.
No, okay. So you can get in touch with Alder Santiago, who serves to represent the board on the Parks Commission. But for the Veterans Memorial, you really need to get in touch with the Veterans Group. Alder DeCola, do you know the official name of that Veterans Group?
No, it's what's his name?
Is it
It's the,
Alvarado? Mr.
Alvarado. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
he's the right guy
Okay.
to get in contact with.
Yeah, so we don't have a say as to where the park benches get placed for the Veterans Memorial. It's mainly Mr. Alvarado with the Veterans Group that will work with the Parks Department in that regard. So my suggestion is reach out to Alder Santiago and give him your suggestion, and hopefully he will relate that information to the Veterans Group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. So again, this is a generous donation from the Lions Club. It's been 3 years in the making, and it will be nice to see them finally up at some point. So if there's no further discussion, we can move on. We are all in favor of this. So anyone want to move item number 2?
I move item 2 and make it a UC, doing the fact that we only have 1 meeting next month and the next reading would be in August.
Second.
Okay, the item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the resolution? Alder Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would propose a friendly amendment to the last whereas clause in light of comments from the Secretary of State. She had said that there's some legal issues that would need to be resolved, and we referred to fear of contracting the illness. But I think it would be better to amend that last whereas statute to read, the Connecticut General Assembly has the authority to amend state statute to give all voters the option to vote by absentee mail. Rather than being so specific, she mentioned some legal issues with getting that specific. So I would rather keep it general and would propose that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Alder.
Second.
Any discussion on this friendly amendment? Yes, Alder Roth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Any other discussion? Yes, Alder Antunes.
Can you just clarify what the amendment will be?
Alder Winter, would you like to repeat it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Alder Antunes. The amendment would change the last whereas clause in the resolution to read, whereas the Connecticut General Assembly has the authority to amend state statute to give all voters the option to vote by absentee mail for the last whereas clause.
Instead of
The current language is to amend state statute to allow for absentee voting due to fear of contracting or spreading illness. She had mentioned the issue with his or her illness versus general illness. And so trying to change the language to make it less specific about, she said there might be a legal issue with fear of illness.
Okay. Alder Antunes, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Alder Roth has her hand up.
Oh, the chair may have frozen. Just a thought, we could, if look at what other, West Hartford, for example, or what the other towns who have passed a similar resolution, just to see if there is, or run it by our Corp Council, to see if there's language that would be thought to be the most effective and not raise any concerns. If we're able to make such an amendment before we bring it to the floor.
I think I froze for a while there.
Did you hear anything of Alder Roth?
Nothing. I'm sorry.
No, I'll try to say it more concisely. This is good. It gives me a second chance. Just one, we could go forward as proposed by Alder Winter, or another thought, if we have time before July, is just perhaps look quickly at what the other towns who have proposed resolutions, to see their language, or run what we have by Corp Council, just to make sure our language sort of doesn't raise any of the concerns that the Secretary of State raised. If we have time to sort of amend it and then bring that amendment forth on the floor.
Al, is that something, Mr. Lucas, is that something we can do? Can we adjust the amendment, still have it as a UC item for our next board meeting, just so we can check with Corporation Council and be sure that we have everything in order?
You can substitute on the floor. So yeah, between now and then, if you want to keep looking, we will just need to put together what your substitute's going to be by the Tuesday before the meeting, so we calculate it.
Okay, so how would we proceed tonight with this item? We vote to pass it and then make the appropriate adjustments?
That is correct.
Okay. Is everyone okay with doing that? I think we should, the resolution, I agree with the colleagues that the resolution should be with the proper language, be sure that it's good with Corporation Council, and then present it to the board.
Madam Chair, let's
Yes.
vote amendment, friendly amendment by Alder Winters, then bring it back to the amended part, and then we
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will vote on the amendment that Alder Winter presented with changing that last whereas, where the General Assembly to give all voters the option to vote by absentee ballot. If we are all in agreement with that, I will call you individually, just say yay or nay or abstain. Alder DeCola.
Yay.
Alder Antunes.
Nay.
Alder Roth.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I'm either way, because I would support kind of double checking. So I'm happy to change it. And then if we have to change it again from there. So I'm sort of, I mean, I'm fine with changing it to, I think it's better than what we have. And then if additional changes need to be done from there, that's great. So that's a very long, I guess, yay.
Okay, thank you. Alder Winter,
Yay.
Alder Singh,
I'll abstain from this one.
Alder Smith,
Nay.
and me, and I'm a yay. So that is 1, 2, 3. 3 yeses, couple of noes, and an abstention. The majority has it. Did I count right? Yes. Yes.
Four yeses.
Yes, 4 yeses, correct. So that's 4 yeses. So the majority has it. We will go with the amendment, and now we will go back to the original item as presented with this
The
last,
item as amended.
correct. Thank you, Alder. The item as amendment, we will now vote on that item. So again, I will ask each one of you whether you support it or not. So Alder DeCola,
Yes.
Alder Antunes,
Nay.
Alder Roth,
Yes.
Alder Singh.
Abstain.
What was it?
I abstain.
Okay. And Alder Smith.
Nay.
And myself, yes. So again,
I'm a yes.
oh, did I skip you? I'm so sorry. Alder Winter.
Yay.
Okay, so again, we have the same results, so the item moves. You know, I just, any discussion on this? Further discussion? Are we good? Everybody happy?
Well, discussion is supposed to come before the vote.
Yeah, well, we did. But you know what, can I just add one thing, and I apologize. I know that we strayed off the topic of this, and I want to apologize to the committee. I allowed it only because I felt it was a very important topic, and with the elections coming up in August, the primaries, and then the overall election November, I felt it was important to allow the discussion to occur, but my apologies for taking up your time. I know our time is valuable, but it's a very important topic. So thank you for your cooperation tonight. Okay, moving along. Would anyone like to move the next item?
I move item 3 for read and file.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. The item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Alder DeCola,
Aye.
Alder Antunes,
Aye.
Alder Roth,
Aye.
Alder Winter,
Aye.
Alder Singh,
Aye.
Alder Smith,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. So the item passes. Anyone want to move the next item?
I move item 4 as leave to withdraw, seeing that the maker's asking it to be removed.
Do I-
Second.
Okay, the item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the read and file and leave? Oh, leave to withdraw. Is that what you,
Leave to withdraw.
any discussion? Seeing none? Okay, let's take a vote. Alder DeCola,
Aye.
Alder Antunes,
Aye.
Alder Roth,
Yes.
Alder Winter,
Yes.
Alder Singh,
Yes.
Alder Smith,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. The item moves to leave to withdraw. Do I hear a motion for adjournment? We have covered all the items.
I move to adjourn.
I see some hands up. Was that to adjourn, Alder Singh?
No question. Madam Chair, I have a question on the proposed wireless communication facilities modification of 414 Chapel Street, New Haven.
Okay, we voted on that item. But I will
Oh, we did.
allow your question, but we did vote on it.
Yeah, I was hoping someone from T-Mobile would have been here to explain this to us because a lot goes on here and towers and stairs and everything else and you know, the historic preservation building issue and no one was here, so to explain
That's
it.
correct. They were reached out to and called and no response. And they said that they would try and have someone, and obviously no one showed up.
And I probably missed it when it came up, you know, and
The agenda came out 5 days ago, so we could have presented questions at that time as well.
okay. I missed it in this forum when it came up. I couldn't recall here and it came up for.
Yes, it was from All Points Technology.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
probably missed that. Thank you.
Alder Roth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe it did go to city plan though, correct?
Yes, it did.
Had a review.
Misty, can you confirm that? Because there was some confusion also with city plan last month.
Something must be wrong with Misty's audio, but yes, city plan has it, yes.
But yes, this was supposed to be heard a while ago, but because city plan was delaying it, it was supposed to be on the agenda last month. But Misty froze. Let me see if I can.
Madam Chair, that's once it's a city plan, I'm quite happy with that. Thank you. No further discussion.
Okay, thank you, Alder Singh.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Any discussion? Well, we don't discuss adjournment. And have a good night, everyone. And thank you again for your patience. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good seeing you all. Good night.
Good night.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
You need to vote to close.
Oh, did I not vote? I keep forgetting myself. I vote to adjourn.
Well, no, not you. Nobody else vote either.
Oh, I thought they voted. Sorry. See, I'm so quick to want to get.
Motion to adjourn.
The motion's on the floor, but we do all the vote.
Anyone second that?
It was second.
Okay.
Aye.
One in favor?
Aye.
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 I think everyone is in favor, including myself. We are adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
All right, it's us, Misty Mazza. Are you good? Something's up with your audio, Misty Mazza. We can't hear you. I see your microphone, but I don't get any. There we maybe. Well, there's your picture. How's your but sound? Yeah, your audio is not working. Okay, that's one way to handle it. Are you going to come back in or calling me? Yeah.